Hi there. In this video, we'll be covering what is ghostwriting. You might feel some hesitation about having somebody write for you, but it's actually extremely common, and the benefits are huge. By the end of this video, you will learn how collaborative ghostwriting is. And stay tuned till the end of the video for a free gift. Let's dive in. Simply put, ghostwriting is collaboration. Ghostwriting is a process in which you work with people, experts, to help you bring your stories forward, bring your messages forward. They could be in many formats. People use ghostwriters for social media, for speeches, for articles, for books. It's really all about bringing out your best possible story, of refining your message and working with experts to tell your story in the best way possible. Ghostwriters, by nature, by the name, are ghosts. They're hidden. They're supposed to be hidden. They don't always end up being hidden and staying hidden, but a lot of times they are. They are people who operate behind the scenes, typically for pay. Sometimes they are credited publicly for their work they do. It's just such a neat process to work with somebody who's bringing the story expertise to the table and allowing you to share your messages with the world. I first shifted to book ghostwriting in 2019. I had worked at some of the biggest newsrooms in the country and I was burned out. I remember I would take the train home at night and I would be FaceTiming with my son because I had missed his entire day. And he was 2 years old at the time and I just decided I needed to step back. But what was I gonna do? What was I gonna do for my career? And I really did a lot of digging and soul searching and realized that I wanted to continue applying the lessons I'd learned as a journalist into a different form and do it from home. And ended up settling on book ghostwriting. And it was just such a fascinating process. I first started picking up projects here and there. I'd go online and go on Fiverr, Upwork, all of the websites, trying to get any work I could. And there was a lot of struggle and a lot of hustle in order to get to the point where I was getting higher quality clients, I was getting higher paying clients, and it took a long time for me to become my best as a book ghostwriter. The first couple of times I worked on books, I was proud of the effort, but I still didn't really understand how to write a book. It was one thing to write and to fill the pages, but it's really something else to connect all the pieces together and make sure the message is as clear as possible, to really figure out what the hook and what the reader takeaway is and the reader benefit, and to orient the entire book around a specific topic. There were so many different skills that I needed to learn that took me years to really master. It was a long process. And I think that's what's interesting to me. I spent all these years storytelling as a journalist, but I had to learn how to storytell in a different way. Book ghostwriting and establishing myself as a book writer, helped me to learn new skills and to bring out stories in new ways. Most opinion columns and most books are written with the help of ghostwriters. And it's interesting for me, shifting from the journalism side, the newsroom, into ghostwriting, to see how prevalent it is. As a journalist, I was kind of under the idea that these thought leaders were constantly writing things themselves. And then peeking behind the curtain, peeking behind the scenes, now I'm the person who's helping people write those columns that appear in newspapers and appear on magazines. It's fascinating. It's strange to look at it through those different lenses. And ultimately, I realized that my role and my job as a ghostwriter is to help people tell the best stories possible. This isn't me writing my stories. This is me helping other people tell their stories. One of the biggest benefits to working with a ghostwriter is it helps you get your time back. Think about how much time it takes to write a book by yourself. And you could be spending years and years. You could spend the rest of your life writing a book and never finish it. Some of the people I've worked with, one person in particular, his father started writing a book and his father passed away. And then the son then picked up this project from his dad and he was struggling. He needed help. It was really special for me to collaborate with the son to help him on his journey. But this was a book that might not have been finished, for 2 generations. Other books that I've worked on with people, they felt the same way, that they could spend their whole lives writing a book, and being able to be a little bit detached as a ghostwriter can be helpful, because I'm bringing story ideas and I'm bringing project management experience to the table and looking at it from a problem-solving approach instead of looking at it from a personal connection. I'm not thinking about how this person's going to feel or the impact. I mean, those topics do come up, but I'm more focused on what can we do to solve the problems of this project, of this story? What can we do to tell the story in the most convincing way? When I start working with a client as a book ghostwriter, I typically focus on trying to tell their story in 3 to 6 months, which means 12 to 24 hours of somebody's time. If somebody can meet with me for 12 to 24 hours, typically for a straightforward book, I can actually finish the draft. That's really all it takes. Think about how much time it would take otherwise for you as a writer to write your own book. It could take years. It could take decades. I know that myself. I had a book about a baseball player, Ken Caminiti, that I spent 8 years writing, 8 years working on before it was published. So I know what it feels like to take a long time on a book. Obviously it's important to get it right, and sometimes books kind of come forward at their right pace. Sometimes it takes a little bit longer than you anticipated. Working with a ghostwriter can make the process a lot simpler, a lot easier. It streamlines everything, and it can really help to get your story told in a much quicker fashion. Another thing that people often struggle with is their writing voice, their writing style. Who are they trying to connect to? Who's the audience, and who's that specific person who's going to want to read this book? Making sure that the voice is consistent is so valuable, and something that I spend so much time getting right. It's important for me to be able to talk to the people I work with, the authors I work with, to talk to them weekly, consistently, every other week, whatever the case may be, and just get their sound, get their cadence, understand what they sound like, and being able to project that onto the page then. And I look at some of the times when projects have stumbled, and a lot of times it's because the author wasn't confident in their voice. I think about one person specifically that I worked with for a little while before they walked away from the project, and they had spent so much time using AI to hone their voice with AI that when we started working together and I had actually written a chapter for them, they didn't think it sounded like them at all. They thought it sounded childish, beneath them, and they walked away. And I actually just took their own words and formed it into a chapter. But their voice had been so changed and altered and refined with AI that they didn't understand what their voice was anymore. It's a struggle with that. It's something that a lot of authors struggle with, is getting their voice right. And working with a book ghostwriter can help you refine your voice, understand what your voice is, to find your voice, really, and to convey it throughout the book, to make sure that it's throughout. Sometimes the voice is going to be stronger, sometimes it's going to be weaker, sometimes you really need to punch it up. But it's important to recognize where that voice plays into your writing and connect it. And I think a lot of times, too, with the authors that I work with, they're also speakers, public speakers. Because they're public speakers, it's actually even more important that their vocal speaking voice matches their writing voice. And that's not to say that they can't sound a little bit different, but if you think about somebody giving a speech based on their book, the way that they talk should be parallel, connected to the way that their writing sounds. So making sure that the voice aligns is so valuable, because as you publish a book and you promote it, you give speeches, you give interviews, you go on podcasts, you want to sound consistent, but you also want people to understand from listening to you or hearing you what this book is going to say and how it's going to sound. And really, you're hitting the same audience, because when you're doing those interviews and speeches, you should be hitting the same audience that's ultimately going to be interested in your book, because that's the focus of these interviews and speeches, is connecting with your readership, your audience, the people that are interested in hearing your stories and your lessons and your messages. And refining that voice and understanding that voice and bringing it out and strengthening it is one of the most powerful things that I do as a book ghostwriter. A lot of times when I first start working with somebody, sometimes they might not have a single idea of what they want to write or what they want to say. And it's so important to burrow down and figure out their deeper message and deeper story. Without that, it just kind of feels like they're flailing. When you're book writing and you don't know where you're going, it feels like you're driving and you don't have directions. You're just aimlessly going somewhere. You don't know where you're going. It helps to have directions, and I feel like a good book ghostwriter is somebody who's giving you directions and kind of driving the car and helping you find your way. As I've developed as a ghostwriter, I found myself more and more drifting away from my own writing style and really embodying the writing styles of the people I work with, the collaborators that I have. And that's been special for me. I think my first couple of ghostwriting projects sounded too much like me because I was still understanding what it sounded like, what it meant to write for other people. It's a big benefit of working with an established ghostwriter is that they will have the expertise to be able to bring out your voice. And they're not interested in bringing out their voice. They're interested in bringing out your voice. And that's the most important goal here is telling your story in your voice in the strongest way possible. All right, now that you've learned all about ghostwriting, I have a free gift to offer you. There's so many topics within book ghostwriting and publishing that are just difficult to understand unless you've been through that experience. And as a result, I recorded a course with a collaborator of mine, Nate Woodbury, to talk through the entire scope of the publishing journey. The course is called Good Book Blueprint. Just head to goodbookblueprint.com. Click the link below. Through the course, you'll learn all about the challenges, the pain points, the struggles. Just kind of see the book ghostwriting process from the author side and from the ghostwriter side as well. And ultimately, the value that can come from that partnership. Remember, good ghostwriting makes great books. I'm Dan Good. Thanks for watching.